There are music histories elsewhere in Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia Pacific. Case study, Afro-Sino Music-Making. This is part of my Key Narratives series, which is part of my Global Music History Microlessons. So why histories elsewhere? Uh, a lot of global music history can be understood along this chronology. From prehistory to 500 CE, there is a Greek and Roman antiquity. From 700 to 1400 CE, Arabic music spread to North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, that is during the Islamic Golden Age, and the territories of the Islamic empires actually overlapped with those of the Greek and Roman empires. From 1500 onwards, there is European, African, and indigenous musical hybridity in the Americas, and also also Western music spread globally. This included Western art music, Christian missionary music, military band music, school songs, popular music, rock music, and rap. And so the geographies involved here are the um, areas around the Mediterranean Sea and also the Americas. So by histories elsewhere, I mean histories that do not necessarily fit well into that chronology. Um, these are histories that took place primarily within or between Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia Pacific. So for example, there is the transmission of Indonesian gamelan to Africa via Madagascar in the early centuries CE. In Asia Pacific, that's the transmission of the Chinese guqin zither to Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and the migration of Japanese as laborers to Hawaii, where they sang Kingfield songs. And there's this history of Afro-Asian exchanges, which involves Asians and Africans or African Americans. So in the case of African Americans, there is a connection to to North America, but here we're talking not about European Americans, but African Americans. In this micro lesson, I'm going to talk about three cases of Afro-Chinese music making. First is Eli Zaelo, who's born in South Africa, and she is now a Chinese pop singer in Hong Kong. Then there is Paul Robeson, who is an African American singer who recorded the Chinese song March of the Volunteers in 1941. And there is the case of Fred Ho and the Afro-Asian Music Ensemble. These are the resources which I used to prepare this micro lesson, and they are found in the description for this YouTube video as well. Eli Zaelo was born in 1994 in South Africa. She studied in LA and then moved to Hong Kong to perform in Disneyland's Lion King musical. She's inspired by Taiwanese singer Teresa Teng. There is a language barrier in terms of Zaelo singing Chinese. For those of you, some of you may understand that Chinese is a tonal language, which means that when a syllable is said differently, it actually refers to different words. So ma means mom, ma means num, ma means horse, and ma means to scold. And so we don't want to confuse that. And furthermore, Chinese pop is lyrics driven, so the pronunciation really has to be very accurate so that listeners know what you are singing about. Zaelo has been creating new Chinese pop songs. She works with her language tutors who co-write the lyrics. She said, I want them to understand my personality and how I would say something, so sometimes they give me suggestions as opposed to just direct translations. Zaelo has been featured on Hong Kong TV, and she has inspired other non-native singers to sing Chinese songs. So we'll listen to a short excerpt from her song Love Stories.
And I know you have these whole grain baguette, half baguettes. Some of them have sweetness in those, or some.
是是我的心，大 着我的灵魂出散步，你会松懈自己，而去找到信息。我们也。
We'll stop there. If you want to listen to the entire song, you can follow the link in the description for this YouTube video. So that's the question. Would Zaelo have appeared on Hong Kong TV if she were Chinese? It seems that people are surprised that a black person can sing Chinese, and this seems to be related to some idea of racial purity that is quite dangerous. In this day and age, is it that surprising that we have Chinese rap, African symphony orchestras, and black singers of Chinese pop? Our second case study is Paul Robeson, who was an African American singer, actor, civil rights activist, and professional football player. He was a bass baritone who recorded Americana, popular standards, classical music, European folk songs, political songs, and poetry and spoken excerpts from plays. In 1941, he recorded the Chinese song Qi Lai. So the person who taught Robeson Qi Lai, translated as March of the Volunteers, is Liu Liangmo. Liu Liangmo was a Christian leader in the mass singing movement in China in the 1930s. Mass singing was thought to raise the spirits of people and soldiers fighting the Japanese who invaded northeastern China in 1931 and attacked the rest of China from 1937 onwards. Liu said, "If we Chinese want to break free of imperialism's iron shackles, if we want China to exert itself, our people must be able to loudly and vigorously sing powerful songs full of spirit and vitality. If the people of China can sing these songs, no doubt the sound will shake the earth. Any youth who can sing should spread the people's song movement to each province, city, county, and countryside. The dawning of a new China will arrive when all the people of China can sing these majestic and powerful songs." Liu ended up being caught between the nationalist and communist parties in China. So during the interwar period, the nationalist and communist parties there was tension between them, but they also cooperated in trying to counter Japanese invasion. After 1945, there was a civil war. The communists won in 1949, and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. So the nationalists in the late 1930s became suspicious of Liu because Liu was involved in mass singing, and mass singing is something that the communists supported. So the nationalists put Liu under house arrest, and what happened was that the US YMCA intervened, and Liu was exiled to the US from 1940 to 49. So that's how Liu met Robeson. In 1940, he taught Robeson the song Qi Lai. In 41, Robeson recorded the song. And in the recording, the song is sung first in Chinese, then in English, and then in Chinese again. What is interesting is that the lyrics for the English version are actually changed. So this is a translation of the original Chinese lyrics. The first line was something that Robeson connected with. Stand up, those who refuse to be slaves. The second and third lines included references to China, such as the Great Wall and the Chinese nation. The translation that Robeson sang actually altered the lyrics to make them more universal. So the second line now contain the words liberty and true democracy, while the third line now says all our world instead of the Chinese nation. So we'll listen to a short excerpt from the beginning where Robeson sings in Chinese.
把我们的血肉组成我们新的长城。中华民族到了最危险的时候。
We'll stop there, but if you want to listen to the entire song, you can follow the link in the description for this YouTube video. So for Robeson, there was a sense of shared struggle. There is Black liberation from slavery, lynching, racial segregation under Jim Crow laws, which were still in effect in 1941, and against racism. There's the Russian people's liberation from the Tsar, Chinese liberation from Japanese, and Jewish liberation from the Nazis. Robeson saw this, in his own words, as an international fight for democracy and against fascism. And here we can recall that during World War II, China, USSR, and US were actually on the same side of the war. They were allied against Germany and Japan. Robeson saw a clear link between race and class. He said, a few landlords owned all the land and told the peasants, as they tell the Negroes in the South, they must remain in slavery. Robeson saw linguistic, philosophical, and artistic kinship between the African and Chinese civilizations, and he understood, for him, Africans and the Chinese had a shared fate of oppression by imperial powers. Robeson denounced the Japanese invasion in China, and he was an activist in 8 committees for China. The historical context changed after World War II. This was the period of McCarthyism, and China and the US were now on different sides during the Cold War. And even now, there's a tendency to look at US-China relations in terms of the Cold War. And the case of Paul Robeson helps us to dismantle that kind of framework. Our final case study is on Fred Ho. Fred Ho was a Chinese-American saxophonist and band leader. He led the Afro-Asian Music Ensemble, which he founded in 1982. So what Fred Ho did in the Afro-Asian Music Ensemble wasn't just multiculturalism. So under multiculturalism, you might have a concert of African-American music and a separate concert of Chinese music. Rather than that, Fred Ho fused African-American jazz and Chinese music. For example, he incorporated the Chinese double reed suona into performances of the Afro-Asian Music Ensemble. We'll listen to a short excerpt from this piece called The Monkey Theme. So what Fred was aiming for is resistance against racial stereotypes. For a lot of listeners, jazz is associated with African Americans and traditional Chinese music with Chinese people. And Afro-Asian hybridity helps to disrupt these racial pigeonholes to some extent. However, the racial association of different musics is not something that just disappears. So, for example, when people hear the suona, the Chinese double reed, it may conjure up some pretty stereotypical images of Chinese culture. So the question of how to interpret this music is something that continues to be discussed. And that brings us to the end of this micro lesson. Thank you for watching.